It's a Monday edition of OneSoccer Direct, and just the two of us going one-on-one. So basically, it's going to be me throwing down on Oliver Platt's head for the next 30 minutes. Gareth Wheeler and Oliver Platt with you. Hope you had an enjoyable weekend. We're in the middle of summer. It's hot. And so are our topics and some of our takes on today's show. Let's start off with the Canadian men's national team, and 19-year-old Luc de Fougerolles has signed on with Fulham, extending his contract for another 4 years. The teenager certainly made an impression this summer, playing very well largely in place of Moise Bombito through the defender's absence, and now de Fougerolles is committed to the Premier League club at Craven Cottage for the next 4 years. It's assumed from here, Oliver, that de Fougerolles will then go out on loan. But what do you make of this new contract and what it means for de Fougerolles' really blossoming career?
Yeah, I think it's good news. There was obviously some rumors about him potentially moving even to North America. I think the Whitecaps were linked at one point. I think in an ideal world, when you look at Luc de Fougerolles and what you saw at the Gold Cup and this summer in general and the potential that's there, you want to see Fulham, a Premier League club, say we want to keep this guy around and continue to invest in him and develop him with a view to potentially becoming a first-team player. So I'm happy to see that seems to be the case. Now he needs to go and get some first-team minutes, and I think he said that himself and has been pretty clear on that. It will be interesting to see now what kind of level he goes to. Does he go down to the Championship, what I would think would be the level in England if he was to stay in England and go out on loan? Or is there an option potentially in Europe to play in a top tier in a different country, France, Netherlands, something like along those lines, to take that next step in his career? So I think this is a really talented player. I think this is someone who, really took his opportunity this summer and now comes into the conversation wheels of if this is someone who could be knocking on the door for the starting lineup for the 2026 World Cup if he has a good 12 months ahead.
Right. I mean, first of all, he needs to play. He needs to play at the highest level possible. There's a lot to like. I like his composure on the ball. I think he sees and reads the game really well. Perhaps needs to grow into his body a little bit more, oftentimes like teenagers do, especially playing at that position, Oliver. So would there be a preferable destination? I'm not necessarily asking about a specific team, but you mentioned the league championship, a very physically demanding league. Like, does that suit him right now? Or could there be another destination that may be a better fit for what he requires, not only to grow, or for over the course of the next 4 years, but really with eyes for next summer in the World Cup?
Well, yeah, I think the question there is kind of, do you go to a league where it might be a bit of a tougher adaptation and a bit more of a risk? And I think the Championship would probably represent that, because you'd have to find a club, again, that's willing to gamble at the centre-back position, not on an attacking player, which I think is a bit different, on a young player who's going to be a starter and a key part of that team. But I think if that was to go well, you would then maybe get the best benefit in terms of de Fougerolles getting that exposure to a physical level, seeing the kind of profiles of forward players that you might come up against next summer at an international tournament. Or do you go somewhere where maybe it's a bit more comfortable, again, one of these more development-focused leagues like the Netherlands, like Belgium, where he'd probably be more assured of his minutes early on and would bring out the best in him in terms of the technical quality he has, which is, for me, his X factor, his ability, like you said, to bring the ball out of the back, to carry, to pass, and that composure in possession. So I would lean towards staying in England, to be honest with you. I think he is good enough to play at that level, and I think it would kind of test him in the areas he would need to be tested, even if there might be a bit more kind of risk with that move as opposed to going to a slightly lower level abroad.
Yeah. I read the links to the Whitecaps. They never really made much sense for me. I don't think that kind of move makes sense at this point of his career. And the Whitecaps already have Veselinovic and Blackman starting at that position, a pretty good center back pairing. I mean, it seemed a strange link to me, which oftentimes happens during silly season. Is it fair to say for Jesse Marsch in the pecking order at center back, he stands as a solid number 3 right now, behind Moise Bombito and Derek Cornelius? Is that the way that you're looking at things?
Right now, for sure. I think he's solid as the number 3. I don't think either of us would see Moise Bombito not starting next summer. He's just, a player of obviously such enormous talent and so important to Jesse Marsch. So I think you're kind of looking at Derek Cornelius if de Fougerolles is going to, stake a claim for a place in the team. do we think de Fougerolles is going to be able to go to the kind of club, if Cornelius is playing week in, week out for Marseille, that gets him the edge over a player like Derek Cornelius, who now in an increasingly young Canadian team is also one of the more experienced players in the group? I'm not sure about that. I still think Bombito and Cornelius would be, I'd put a pretty good percentage chance they're starting the first game of the World Cup, but there is an interesting set of skills, I think, with de Fougerolles that could make that interesting.
Yeah, at some point, whether it's 2030 or beyond, de Fougerolles can really establish himself as a first-choice center back for the national team. Yeah. No doubt about that. But I think it's Bombito and Cornelius, and there's quite a gap. And I think that they need other solutions, other potential solutions at center back for Canada. And that puts more pressure on de Fougerolles developing over the course of this next year and getting first-team football. Like, that has to be a considerable concern for Jesse Marsch. You lose Bombito or Cornelius through injury, and these things happen, Ollie. It's football after all. You're rather thin at that position. So I think there's a lot of pressure to ensure that de Fougerolles ends up in the right spot. I'm sure that this is part of the plan in him signing this 4-year contract, and I'm sure that we'll find out in short order where he will go next. But I do think that he is one of the most important players to watch when it comes to the Canadian men's national team.
Anyone else in that mix, Wheels? Like, I thought Waltzman did okay this summer. I don't know that he's a player who's going to push the starting lineup. Miller has obviously struggled. There's Knight Labelle. It's not particularly deep.
Look, Joel Waterman has some certain strengths. I think he's excellent on the ball. He's a wonderful passer, distributor of the ball. But this Canada team, I can't see them at the World Cup being a team that's dominating possession. I don't think it suits them, to be honest with you. I think it suits Canada to be, very aggressive defensively, try to play in transition. I just don't think that that's Joel Waterman's game. I think he can do good enough, a decent enough job defensively. But I think that he's maybe the number 4 at some distance. Same goes for Kamal Miller. Just I like both of these players, but not necessarily in the way that Canada wants to play. Knight Labelle, similar story to de Fougerolles, but maybe a step or two behind in his development, and probably not anywhere near as close to having as high of a ceiling as de Fougerolles as well. I think there's an opportunity this year for another potential center back to either be brought into camp or step up or develop, and there could inevitably be a serious look towards maybe finding another option to provide some depth at that position. Remember, if it is a 23-man squad, interestingly enough, we saw Richie Larea play center back again for Toronto FC on Saturday night. So, like, these adaptable players, like being able to come in and play different positions, I mean, it's so valuable. I still think Alistair Johnston, if need be, could slide in and play the right side of center back. I think he's versatile enough. Maybe doesn't have the speed or physicality, but again, certainly the smarts. Yeah, but certainly I think that he has the football brain to be able to play that position. So we'll see. The one thing de Fougerolles, one thing that's clear that they don't work on at Fulham is penalties. Oh my word. I feel so bad for it, because not all players are cut out to take a penalty, but those two that we saw in the Shield and at the Gold Cup, yikes. So if you're watching a game and Fulham's going to a penalty shootout, just go like this.
That's it. That's okay. If penalties are what he needs to work on, he's in a decent place.
He just shouldn't take penalties. That's it. I was so surprised, by the way, at the Gold Cup that Johnston and Larea, those were the other two options. Neither one of them stepped up to take it. That really surprised me. But we really like Luc de Fougerolles, bright future ahead. And we're really curious to see how this will all play out over the next calendar year. Before we wrap up the Canada segment here, any other player in particular that you're just kind of waiting on right now to see where they land next? There's a number of candidates that come to mind, but who are you focusing on, Ollie?
Well, I think the obvious one, again, kind of springboarding off of what he did this summer, would be Nico Seeger. You would hope, I think, to see him maybe make that step up to a higher level based on how he's played in Croatia and now for Canada as well. There's been various reports of interest in him in different countries, so we'll see on that front. I'm not sure what the latest is there, but he looks like a player who, number one, can play at a higher level than he currently is with respect to that league, and obviously he is playing for a big club, but it's a lower level in terms of the domestic league there. And two, could again push for Canada to play some serious minutes, whether it's at right back or in midfield. So that would be the one I'm keeping my eye on.
The one that I'm definitely keeping my eye on, something has to give with Ismail Kone. Like,
Right.
this guy is extraordinarily talented. He didn't play in that game against Guatemala, didn't come onto the field for Jesse Marsh. It seems like Marsh is either delivering a message to the young player or doesn't rate him as highly as others. Something's going on here. One, he needs to get out of Marseille. In their behind-the-scenes footage of their season-long documentary, they showed him on the training ground and him and De Zerbi being separated from one another. I mean, it's gratuitous and completely unnecessary. And by the way, these things happen on the training ground. But the fact that then he was, cast aside by the manager and now seems to be in a difficult spot, it's not where he needs to be right now. Out of all the central midfield options, and I'm including Stefan Eustachio in that equation, he's the most talented. But these last 2 years just haven't gone to plan, and he hasn't emerged like many of us thought he would. Canada will be a better team next summer if Kone has a clear, defined, and useful role, whether it be in the 11 or beyond. And right now, like, that's why his club football is so important here over the next year, to prove to the manager that, it's worth taking a chance, it's worth taking a risk on this talent, because he's the one guy that I look at who's part of the group, has the ability to step in and potentially be a game changer.
Yeah, if his role is what it was at the Gold Cup next summer at the World Cup, you are not making the most of what is at your disposal. It has to be better. And I know part of that is on Kone himself, and he's got to find the right move and get to playing. But yeah, there's so much more for him to give.
Yeah, it's weird. And especially for a young player, sometimes they're pushed through a little bit too quickly. I said this from the outset. Going to Watford was a risk, because the way that they changed through their managers and how the lifespan of a player is very brief generally at that club, and things have happened a little bit too quickly. Don't you think now he just needs a little bit of consistency here? It's not another loan. It's a sale, someone that's going to put their arm around him and carefully nurture that talent. And there's clear and present talent that he possesses.
Yeah, something a bit more kind of, maybe a more experienced manager, someone who can put, to take a bit more care of him. I do think with De Zerbi, like, as much as he's obviously a very good manager and interesting coach, like, he can be erratic, right? Like, he's not necessarily someone who's going to have a lot of patience with young players, I don't think. And that video kind of didn't sit with me very well. I think if you're a manager and you want to bring this player back in and you kind of care about his development, you're not having footage like that go out to protect the player. So the fact that it did for me means, his time at Marseille seems to be up, and we'll see where he goes from here. Hopefully he can find a better fit at a similar level.
Especially such a young player. Like, this isn't Mourinho Pogba or something like that, right? Like, this is something very different. So the message clearly sent. Kone, fingers crossed he lands in a good spot to kickstart his very young career.